There was no big problem, as I perceived it at the time. There was more of an interest in freedom and how do you get a clear head, and so I was really in the midst of exploring a whole lot of sort of self-development technology, methodologies, and personal growth stuff, and then also started my own consulting practice and had a great mentor who walked me through a couple of the techniques that are still core to GTD, like the mind sweep, getting stuff out of your head, and deciding next actions on all that stuff. And he walked me through the process. I thought I had my act together pretty well until he got a hold of me and had me do that exercise. And I went, holy geez, whoa, this was really far out. So it was more like I got stoned from the technique. It wasn't like I had to do this. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. But not only was it a great experience, but it also then made it much more effective in terms of focus and the ability to focus. So I began, exploring these techniques for myself, and then turned around and started using them with my clients, and turns out it created exactly the same experience. Nice. More control, focus, more space, more clarity. Yeah. And no matter who they were or what they were doing or what business they were in, everybody could use more control and more focus and more clarity, right? Yeah, how they used it was up to them. So I began to discover just the power of this process, that without exception, anybody got stuff out of their head, decided what it meant, decided the next actions, if there were any, and parked them in some sort of a trusted system that it produced exactly the same result. And, clarity and focus and control are really the essential aspects of self-management. Yeah. And so what everybody wanted back then, and this was, in the early 80s, that was when time management started to be quite a popular thing, and all the paper planners started coming out, and, that was a big idea. Of course, you can't manage time, but what people needed when they said I could use better time management was just more control and more focus and more clarity and more space. Nice. So it turned out that what I was doing solved those issues, and so I rode the time management wagon in the corporate training world simply because once people tasted this, they go, God, that's really what we needed.
Yes, yeah, it's almost like you've sold them what they want. I think they want time management, but it really leads to all those other things you said of the control, the clarity, the focus, and fantastic.
Yeah, nice. So you mentioned what time management used to be like. So can you just tell us a little bit about what it used to be like, and also a bit about your system and how it's different to what time management used to be and how it's evolved?
Well, when I first started doing this, if you even had a pocket day timer, you were a geek. So, the first obviously was a calendar, and the pocket calendar in the U.S. anyway, day timer was the first, what was quite popular. Day timer was actually built and designed by an attorney because there's 15-minute increments. That's how he billed time. So, it started out as just a tool for an attorney to keep track of billable hours. But then obviously calendars, as people started to have busier lives, became, pretty important thing to have. I don't know how long they've been around, but, probably 3,000 years or so.
I know accountants they're down to 6-minute billable hours now from 15.
Really? Anyway, and even then, just even having a to-do list was kind of advanced at that point. But then, as the world was getting more and more complex, people started to try to organize more just with a to-do list and a calendar, and they started to put a lot of their to-dos on their calendar. And that doesn't work, especially because things change a whole lot. So initially I discovered that the calendar really needs to be sort of sacred territory for the things that you don't want to miss, you can't miss, that the stuff that has to get done that day, sometime on that day or sometime that day, and that if you started to put other stuff on there, you could screw that up really bad and miss the stuff that you really had to get done, and then also feel bad about all the stuff that you didn't get done that you wrote on your calendar. So quite simple little change was getting rid of the daily to-do list and creating a total life to-do list, which you didn't have to keep rewriting, and then hold that up against your calendar. So in the early days, it was just a very simple little change like that. But then what happened, as I began to develop and test this out further, seeing how useful having a lot of support or collateral data, portably for you. And that was when I first got into this game, we actually designed our own planner and then discovered the really elegant one out of Denmark, Time System. They called it Time Design in the U.S. And me and a partner and I got the rights to distribute that in the U.S., had it translated into English. Very elegant system. Because back then people didn't have a system. The pocket calendar was about it. And so when I started to do training around this, we wanted to give people a tool because there weren't any tools. And so that tool was so elegant, it became a self-management kind of notebook. And it was organized very elegantly. So you had a calendar and you had places to have these different kind of action lists. But it also had a data bank, which was a 10-section part of the center part of the book that was different colored and numbered 1 through 10. And it had just an index, a blank index, 1 through 10, that you just filled out yourself. Oh, wow, that's cool. So that so you could start to keep track of various kinds of things, project notes. You could start to organize checklists. You could have maps. There's all kinds of stuff that started to be really cool, especially when it was a cool tool like that and was elegant graphically. Then, of course, when the world changed, when things like the Palm Pilot came out, because up until that point, I could honestly tell people that this is absolutely the best tool they could use. I used that tool for 18 years myself. It was absolutely cool. But as soon as the Palm came out, I went, wow, here's another kind of a way to manage lists that's really cool. It has a lot of advantages to that, much smaller, and it was sexy. It was really cool. You pull it out in a dark bar, and you could see that little light, and learning to do the little script stuff, writing on it, and it was very cool, and it very much fit with my model. So I could not honestly say there was any one tool that was the best tool, and so at that point I gave up a lot of revenue too. Tying the methodology to a specific tool and just getting people focused on the methodology, because people got all wrapped around the tool, as they usually do, and instead of the methodology itself.
For sure.
So that was back in the late 80s or early 90s whenever I forget when the Palm came out, but it was around that time I unhooked from any tool. And then had the challenge to just turn people on to the methodology and had it be tool independent.
Yeah, nice. So just on the methodology, I think we've got a good taste as to some of the reasons why we should be doing it. And the first big step that you mentioned was that big mind sweep of getting everything out of your mind and the capture phase.
Yep.
And can you talk
that's the first thing.
Yeah, I guess how we get everything out of our head.
Write it down.
Yeah. And what does that process look like?
Duh. It looks like I need cat food. You write cat food. Yeah. I need a life. You write life. I need to call George. Write George. You call George. Just get it down. Whatever's on your mind.
Yeah, and that's literally everything. Yeah.
Well, not everything. You have 50,000 thoughts a day, so you're not seeing me write anything right now. I'm just grazing. But if you said, "Hey, David, would you get back to me about that?" and I said, "Yes," that I'd better write down. Because now I've opened a loop that I can't finish the moment that I think of it. And then if I don't write it down, there's a subliminal part of me that starts to keep track of it and starts to gnaw at me.
Nice.
Only I forgot what it was consciously. I just created the pressure of this open loop. And then people walk around with this sort of gnawing sense of anxiety that there's probably stuff they should be doing, forgot what the hell it was, might be more important than whatever they're currently doing. So most people just aren't present anywhere.
That's a good point.
Because of all that stuff.
Yeah, that's probably one of the most ironic things about reading a book on productivity. It's, I guess, at the core of it, it's being more zen and more present with all the work we do as well, so we can just enjoy the time when we're not necessarily working. So
Zen just came up with the same answers I did. So,
yeah, phenomenal.
Like, hey, so you're much more effective if you're present.
Do you think you can have too many projects? You mentioned you got 50,000 thoughts a day, and if we capture so much in our in-basket, Can you get to the point where we got too much in the system, or do you think we should get down as much as we can?
Well, as I say, if you're going to give people a great holiday party and food and a big banquet and whatever, and you sit down and plan that with your partner, and it's going to be great or whatever, where do you go shop for food? You don't go to the local 7-Eleven, bar, thing on the corner.
Yeah.
Where do you go? You go to a huge supermarket that has lots of choices and options. Well, you'll find the best stuff, right? So I'd worry if you only had 6 things on your list. They all may be crap. Give yourself 200, and then look. And then if you decide to have a beer instead of doing any of that, it's good beer.
Yeah.
Because look at how many things it's better than. Now I know I'm making it sound a little silly, but the only time there would be too much. Sorry. The only time there would be too much is if you've got so much in so many different places that you can't review the whole gestalt very easily. Mm-hmm. That's when you're in trouble. But you're in trouble with 12 things if that's what's going on.
Yes.
So it's just that if you have 200, well, quite frankly, if you're actually keeping track of those 200, you'll be fine. I mean, you never get rid of the challenge to be making good choices about what to do. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those, is the glass half full or half empty. You guys either feel really good that talking to me right now is exactly what you need to be doing in your life right now, right? Well, that's up to you. Or you're feeling crappy about all the other stuff you should get to. Want this guy David get off Skype so I can go do the stuff I really ought to be doing instead. So the latter one, you're going to be in stress.
Yeah, for sure.
The former one, you feel confident doing what you're doing, but you guys probably looked at all the other stuff in your life and said, "No, this is it." Mm. And we all 3 of us may have made a mistake. We'll find out, but at least we'll be present with our mistake.
Fantastic. We read the book, and we did our best, I guess, to try and dissect it in a 20-25 minute episode between us. But one of the things we certainly recommend people read it for themselves, because there's a lot in there that we missed. But one of the big things we wanted you to maybe talk a bit more about was the weekly review, I guess. What does our weekly review look like, and what do we need to do off the back of that?
Yeah, well, it just means, once a week, most people usually do it at the end of their work week. You need to blow the whistle, time out, close the door, shut down social media, stop pinging email and dancing around the web, and sit down and, as I say, pull up the rear guard. You need to catch up and get clear, get current, with all of your stuff. It's a little hard to do that if you haven't, implemented at least to some degree the getting things done methodology, where this stuff is out of your head and already in some sort of a system that you can then look at and catch up with. If you're just trying to catch up in your head, good luck. Your head's just such a crappy office. And, it wouldn't hurt to stop and think, gee, what am I missing? What happened this week? What do I need to do about any of that? Look at the next week or two coming toward you and go, oh, God, that reminds me. Catch all the OSs, of that, and that's, it's that simple kind of just take a breath and catch up that most people are not doing.
Yeah.
But again, most people don't even have the system to catch up with. So it very much ties into it. But it is basically the health factor. Once you start to implement this methodology, if you're not doing the weekly review, you'll fall off this game pretty fast.
Yeah.
Because as soon as your system gets out of date and incomplete, it's not worth the trouble to keep it up.
Yeah, nice.
And so you can fall off. The good news is it's easy to get back on, but it's very easy until this becomes really habitual as a lifestyle way that you just manage yourself. It's really an art of how you manage the flow of life's work. But catching that's externalized now, and that your head's a crappy office, 4 things max is all that your head can take care of and manage by itself until you lose perspective and then are not remembering and reminding yourself of the right stuff. And so building the external brain just becomes this absolutely critical behavior, and then keeping it alive and well. You have to nurture it.
Yeah.
And that's what the weekly review is about.
Nice. So in the book, I guess we talk about how to do things very productively and all of that. But you also talk about rising vertically from the Horizon 3, Horizon 4, and Horizon 5. So what do you think is the best way of choosing what to do in your life, or how do you, filter things to choose what to do or what projects to take on?
Well, ultimately the priorities would be the horizons commitments that you've got. I mean, getting things done, what do you need to get done? Well, you need to fulfill your life purpose. You need to move forward on whatever vision you have about career and lifestyle. You need to then make sure that you're getting done the stuff in the shorter term that needs to get done if you actually want your vision to happen. Mm-hmm. You need to then make sure that you're maintaining all the stuff to be healthy and to maintain balance, like finances and relationships and fun and health and vitality and all that. You also then need to manage all the projects that you have about any of the above, which is 30 to 100 things usually. And then you've got about 150 to 220 next actions about all those moving parts. Mm-hmm. Emails to send, stuff to buy at the store, stuff to talk to your partner about, yada, yada. So all those things are what people need to be getting done. How conscious they are of those various levels is up to them. And maybe you don't need to set goals. Paul McCartney said he never set a goal, never had a plan. He did okay.
He did okay.
So GTD, this methodology, is not about telling you should do those. It's about you getting to recognize whether you've got those going on. And if so, you better objectify them. Otherwise, some part of you is going to feel uncomfortable that you're off track, that you're off purpose, that you're out of alignment or something. Mm-hmm. But again, this methodology is so, in a sense, independent of the content. It's more about, are you clear? You want to know? I've got a pretty simple criteria for priorities. It's called what's most on my mind right now that would feel the best if I got it off my mind. Mm-hmm. And that could be play with the dog. It could be write a business plan. It could be write a book. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Who knows?
Yeah, fantastic. What about the people? I feel like there's a bit of almost pride or a bit of identity in being busy and working. Oh, I'm so busy. I've got so many meetings. I've got so much on my plate. I've got so much to do. Does it scare these people to think maybe they could just organise it all, then they're not busy anymore?
Yeah, that probably freaks them out at some level.
And do you think there is that?
It's not consciously. It's a very uncomfortable place, meaning unfamiliar place to have actually nothing on your mind. And to feel and to still have all the responsibilities and accountabilities that you have if you have a complex life. Mm. So it's a very unusual place. That's why, the biggest barrier of entry to this methodology and the biggest reason people fall off is that their addiction to stress. Mm. Willingness to tolerate not doing this, the willingness to tolerate the anxiety, the stress, the pressure. It takes a couple of years to start to raise the bar internally so that you feel uncomfortable if you don't do a weekly review.
Nice.
You feel uncomfortable making a commitment and not writing it down.
Yeah, nice. So how do you think we install these habits? Because it's a big system and it's going to be life changing if people implement it. But installing the habit can be probably the hardest part for some people.
Yeah. Get started, just one step at a time. Just do a piece of it. I mean, this is not running with scissors, guys. There's nothing that that you could do here that not going to help.
Yes.
If you just write three more things down than you had before, you'll feel better. You'll sleep better. If you just decide the next action on something, just one thing before the pressure forces you to, you'll feel better. You start to focus on some larger outcome that you want to accomplish and decide, how you move forward on that. You'll feel better. So none of this stuff is going to hurt.
Yeah.
So you can, people say, well, how long does it take to get the value of this? I say, well, how long would it take to write the top 10 things on your mind right now down and decide the next action on those? That's about how long it'll take. Give yourself about 60 seconds and just do these behaviors and watch what happens. But if you're talking about how do you make that consistent and how do I build a systematic process that I trust, that I'm doing even when I don't feel like doing it, it takes a year or two to make that happen. You just have to keep going, keep chunking at it, keep working at it. It's if you start to build in the weekly review and get a cool tool that you like using, those are good keys. So, you find that you like paper planner, get a cool one. Yeah. You like digital apps, and there are hundreds of them out there now that are just list managers. But you find one that's cool that you love, or you're already using something like that, and you can start using it using the GTD methodology. That's one of the reasons my stuff hit such a nerve in the tech community, because it allowed all the techies to use whatever they were currently using, but in a much more effective way.
Nice.
Whether that was Outlook or Excel or Word or anything anybody was using that was digitally, once you caught the power of lists, not just lists themselves, but the right lists, with the right content on them, then those tools started to be turbocharged.
Yeah, nice. Why aren't we taught this, in school or in college or anywhere before? Unless we seek out your book, we wouldn't have found out these time management systems. How come we're not taught this earlier?
Beats me.
I feel like
come on. Well, most. Why didn't people start doing any of this stuff other than calendars and to-do lists? That was only 3 or 4 decades ago.
Yeah.
In the history of work and the history of how we manage work, that's quite a short period of time.
Yeah.
Mm. What do you see as some of the most common mistakes people make with their own time management system or their productivity system or whatever they have?
It's incomplete.
Mm.
It's not everything. They just wrote down the most important stuff. And then when they go do something that they need to do that's not one of those most important things, they're feeling guilty.
Yeah.
As opposed to, no, here's the 300 things that I've got that I need to do. Buy dog food. Well, that's not the most strategic thing in my life. You have a dog? Yeah. Do you love your dog? Yeah. At some point, you'll find that getting dog food is probably going to be the most important thing you need to do.
Yeah.
You could go, well, why do you have a dog? Well, because she opens my heart when I show up and walk in the door, and she wags her tail, and she loves me, and she licks me. I love that, and it just makes me feel warm and fuzzy all day, even though I had a bad day. Well, great. How important is that? That's really key to me, to feel better, because then I don't kick the dog, I don't kick my wife, I don't kick anything. I'm a much better person because my heart's open. So you could take something as simple as dog food and track it back up the horizons. Why does that matter to you? And at some point, that is the most important thing. That's why I'm setting priorities all the time. You can't stop. Anything you decide to do, you decided as a priority to do instead of all the other things you could be doing.
Yeah.
So you're making priority decisions all the time. So again, it comes back to the challenge, because most people want a simple formula to get themselves off the hook, to be accountable moment to moment, to be doing exactly what they ought to be doing that moment.
Yeah,
so
nice.
That's I guess the Zen's aspect of this methodology, which is the reason you need to manage all the stuff that's not that important is because it's not that important, but you still got to do it. And if it's, if you don't give appropriate attention to what has your attention, it'll take more of your attention than it deserves. I mean, the fact that I need dog food pops into your head more than once means you're inappropriately engaged with your dog.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right?
And for the people listening who are after the easy tool and the quick fix, what do you think the one takeaway that I guess the easiest action to get the most results from the whole book, do you think?
Well, it's kind of hard to nail one, because if you do one without 2 or 3 of the others, then it's kind of hard to do. It's really a 3-step process. Is the basic, capture the stuff, decide next actions and outcomes, if it's actionable at all, and then park the stuff someplace that you're reminded of it in the right way. So it's the capture, clarify, and organize, those 3 steps of the 5 that I elucidate that are the most critical, just in terms of behaviors themselves.
Yeah, for me, it's that next action, and then also the 2-minute rule is a big one as well. If it's less than 2 minutes, just do it. Yeah.
Well, that's changed people's lives. Just that.
Yeah. No, exactly. I definitely agree with that one. In terms of obviously, we love reading your book, and we're reading a book a week. I can see a stack of books behind you there. What are some of your favorite books and books that you'd recommend for people to read?
2 come to mind. One is Kevin Kelly's book, The Inevitable. Came out last year, I think.
Nice.
He was a founding editor of Wired, and it's the 12 inevitable trends that are happening, that are affecting everyone. And he's basically curated, the last 20 years of his experience in the tech world, saying, things like AI and virtual reality, those are no longer toys. They're going to change the world.
We're actually speaking with Kevin Kelly soon.
Oh, good, cool. Yeah, well, it's a great book. And The Fix. The Fix is a great book.
Haven't heard of it.
Look it up. I can't remember the author's name. He's a really, really excellent writer and a journalist for the New Yorker, I think, in the States. But he's written, I think, about the 10 things that have actually been fixed that are some of the biggest problems we're dealing with in the world right now. And he gives real case studies of the politicians that had the guts to do what they needed to do to affect them, things like immigration. The Canadians got that nailed really, really well. Corruption, Singapore got that nailed really well. even the have and have-nots, even though the guy's in jail now, the guy in Brazil, who basically instituted a lot of those kind of programs. So the fix is really sort of a cautiously optimistic book that it's actually possible to start to deal with some of these things, that seem incorrigible right now. So highly recommend that.
Yeah. So I guess there's 2 points there. So with, I guess, the technology moving forward and some of the issues that we've got going forward as well, are you actually an optimist when you got technology moving the way it is, and then we've got other issues in the world like global warming and the world economy and all that kind of stuff coming? Are you optimistic for what's ahead for the world?
Well, I don't think we've ever had any less problems than we have right now. I just think we're much more conscious of them. And the nervous system on the planet has just gotten so wired that, you'll know something immediately that happened across the world. Right. So that's kind of new, is how much of that stuff there is going on. But trust me, all that stuff's been going on, forever anyway. So we just weren't that aware of it. I don't even think about pessimism and optimism. I just keep going forward. See, my mission basically is to get the world to be a place with no problems, only projects.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got that issue. Great. What would solved look like? What would resolved or clarified look like? And getting the world to start to get in the driver's seat of these things, as opposed to play victim about these things that are problems. Doesn't mean it's easy. You actually don't even need to like your life to get it off your mind and get present. So I'm not into the rah-rah, I'm not a motivational speaker, in other words. I sleep as long as I can. I'm a lazy guy, but I am very much into people being that there's a whole lot of improvement to your life and development of your life that happens when you stop playing victim and stop complaining.
Yeah, fantastic. Right. I guess just to finish up, is there anything you want to leave us with, and then where can people find more about you and the getting things done methodology and all those other things?
Well, come on, GTD in 60 seconds, right? Get any potentially meaningful thing out of your head. Decide sooner than later exactly what it means, what you're going to do about it, if anything. Park the results in some trusted place that you step back and look at and review on some regular basis, and keep current with its trusted system, so that you make confident choices about what you're doing instead of just hope that what you're doing is right. That's the whole methodology in and of itself. So, so if you want to find out more about it, read the book again. I've had people read it 12 times. They say it's a totally different book every time you read it, because I put the whole thing in there.
Yeah,
I didn't. I wrote the whole manual about it, and you don't really need anything more than that. Just keep reviewing it, and just keep reminding yourself of the next cut that you need to take, to get up to speed.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
And you can get in touch with me. GettingThingsDone.com is a website, and you'll see all of our global partners. We've really sort of shrunk ourselves so we could expand what we're doing. We've now partnered with people around the world to deliver the training around this and coaching around this. So, wherever you are in the world hearing this, just go on our site and look for global partners, and you'll see lots of trainings, public seminars, and things like that going on around the world. So that's what I'm doing now, primarily, is supporting the network of our partners that are doing this.
Yeah. Phenomenal. That's a fantastic way to end it. It's number 3 for me. I've read it 3 times now, and I've gotten something new every time. So, thank you so much.
Me too. I pick up the book and just thumb through it sometimes. I go, that's really good. Oh, I wrote that. Oh, God, yeah, I ought to do that.